Are we seeing some of the biggest risks ahead for Bitcoin, for crypto as a whole? Hey and welcome to today's video. My name is Julian. On my channel, it's all about making you crypto fit. I discuss the beautiful world of decentralization, cryptocurrencies, blockchain, much more. I try to kind of look at this from various angles. Obviously, on the one hand, as the CEO of the Cake Group, talk from the retail side, enterprise side, the R&D side, as an investor, personal investor, obviously also from the regulatory side. A lot of authorities we also talk to. And yeah, not only from crypto, but also from macro. And so from all of this, I do actually foresee that over probably the next 12 to 18 months, we may have some of the biggest risks for Bitcoin ahead in a long time. Now, I don't think these risks are bigger than what we have seen maybe in its very early years, but probably if I look at over the past couple of years, I do think we have some major risk ahead. And in this video, I really want to highlight that. I want to explain that. I want to talk to you about price targets or potential price targets and really kind of dig a bit into the nitty gritty. Maybe at the beginning, think about it. What's the biggest risk in your side or your opinion? You can let me know either in the chat here, or you can also let me know in the comments afterwards. No peeking, no cheating. Maybe be creative yourself. Now, obviously, we have seen a lot of things happening. We have seen collapses from FTX, from 3 Arrows Capital, from Terra Luna. We have had all the Tether FUD with regulation, SEC crackdowns. Now, what if this is all small to what may be ahead in the next 12 to 18 months? Let me start with cargo cults. Cargo cults, if you don't know, actually stem from the Second World War, actually after the Second World War. And what happened there was the US was fighting back the Japanese, and they were going from island to island. And so obviously these islanders, very basic, they haven't really seen those airplanes. They didn't really understand what was all happening. But basically the Americans, they all came in. They had to build the landing strips, the launching strips for the airports. And the way this name came was what these Americans obviously did after they had built all those things. They all came there, and they kind of, when the planes came, they had to kind of help the planes land, and they built the towers, and then they put all the special gear on, and they helped the planes land, and then the planes threw off the cargo, and the cargo obviously fed the soldiers, and the soldiers wanted to be really kind to the islanders, and they kind of gave all this cargo, a lot of things, to the islanders. So for the islanders, this was almost like God. And so what the islanders thought what was happening was they looked at the actions that the Americans did, and they tried to replicate that once once the soldiers left, especially after the war, because the cargo didn't come anymore. And the islanders then went and they tried to kind of replicate what the Americans did, because they thought if they would just stand there and kind of give the landing signs and put on a special hat and kind of, I don't know, sit in the tower and kind of talk into something, then maybe those planes would appear again and would drop off the cargo. And now obviously we understand that this didn't happen. But the crazy thing, and that's where the name comes from, there were these gurus, right? There were people who said, "Oh, I can predict what's going to happen, and I'm the one who has the wisdom." And literally cults were built around these people. Oh, it's not going to happen today. It's going to happen in a month. Oh, it's going to happen in a year. Or it's going to happen in 10 years, right? It became a sectish following. And the crazy thing, it's even lasting almost until today. There's cargo cults on those islands still today. They almost looked at like gods. And it's insane to kind of think of that. And so, obviously, looking at this from the outside, it's very easy to kind of understand what went wrong. And what went wrong was that the actual causation, the reasons weren't truly understood. And that can be extremely dangerous if you don't really understand why things have happened. And so, one of the easiest things, in my opinion, very easy for cargo cults to kind of fall for, is chart analysis. Because in a technical analysis, what you do is you kind of go and you say, look, in the past, this is what happened. And so we're seeing a similar pattern right now. So next, the same thing is going to happen. What you should be doing is you should be looking what happened in this point in time. Is it likely that this thing happens again? So the same thing as basically the islanders went, they went there and they kind of made all these signs. that was irrelevant. What they should have done is they should have looked, is the US still fighting the war against the Japanese in the Second World War? And so they should have realized that it's a different pattern, not because the pattern makes the price, but because the events make the price. And so to me, this is so fundamentally important. And what I have seen, sadly, over the past couple of years, we've seen this with stock to flow, with Bitcoin. We have seen this with doesn't matter, in El Salvador with the volcano bonds, and we've seen this with so many things, right? We've seen this with store value. We've seen this with, I don't know, these 4-year cycles. We have seen this, oh, the 200-day line is never going to get broken. Then it will, the 200-week line is never going to get broken. Then this thing is never going to get broken. But at the end, right, you need to understand that this is just a cargo cult. It's nothing else. You need to understand what happened at that point that it turned around. And what's going to happen today? Is it going to be the same event that's going to make something turn around? And so, to me, the biggest issue I see right now in Bitcoin actually are these cargo cults. It is that people don't fully reflect and think what made the price go up in the past. Is this the same thing that is gonna happen right now? I actually think this is fundamentally the biggest risk. To me, that's a bigger risk than Tether. I think the Tether risk is there, but I think it's not relevant enough anymore, especially with these interest rates. I don't think that's the risk is Satoshi, or I don't know, having some elliptic curve that I don't know was designed by the NSA and it's just there to kind of steal money from you. I don't think the a potential Binance blow up or Huobi right now. I don't know. I don't think these are massive kind of issues. I don't think if the ETF, for example, doesn't get approved, I don't think that would be such a massive issue. I think the issue is if people don't fundamentally understand what actually drove interest in the past and is this going to drive interest right now. And you have to be fundamentally honest to yourself. And I think that's just the hard part. And what people do is just like in these cargo cults on the islands, they're going to come up with something new. They're going to procrastinate. They're going to delay. They're going to say, you know what, this time it didn't work, but the next time it's going to work. And obviously, people all being hungry, all waiting for the cargo to come down again, are just going to follow and they're going to believe the gospel without actually reflecting honestly and realizing, maybe this is actually a bit different. So, this to me is the biggest danger. And the biggest danger comes down to one fundamental thing that I have been trying to say for, I know, for years, I would say, but I've been very vocal about this over the past couple of months, especially. And that is that I fundamentally don't believe that Bitcoin is a currency. It's not a cryptocurrency. I don't think that's a metric to look for or to kind of something to strive for. And it has become very clear. And this is also something that, I don't know, I think the first time I discussed this was probably in 2017. Also a bit of an inflation topic at that point. I discussed it. That I don't think Bitcoin is an inflation hedge. For me, it was always digital gold, meaning not gold as an inflation hedge, but more of a hedge against Wall Street, against kind of the insurance of the centralized kind of banking system. So nothing about money printing per se, nothing about inflation, none of those. Not a store of wealth or like this safety storage, all these things. It's not backed by any data to do that. And I know people keep selling this or keep talking about this, but it's actually not true. And that's the same thing with the cargo cults, right? It's such a fundamental problem. So what the data actually shows, and that's basically the two things to me, right, that always kind of showed what is going to drive the Bitcoin price. Number one, and that's been the main driver right now, has been speculation. And speculation obviously has a lot to do with M2, simply not so much because of inflation, but because people having excess liquidity, right? Inflation is actually not what's gonna give people extra money. It's gonna give them extra numbers, but these numbers tend to go up slower than their living cost. So they tend to have subjectively less purchase power, right? So they have more currency, but they have less purchase power. And so during times of speculation, they actually have the exact opposite, or they try to kind of squeeze extra currency out, kind of forgave on something else, and just kind of double down on speculation. And we have seen this, right? We have seen this during the 2016, 2017 kind of rally with ICOs, like extra liquidity in the market. We've obviously seen this with 2020, 2021. And so to me, it's just important to kind of understand this. So if I look over the next 12 to 18 months, right, to me, I'm super bullish over the next, let's say, 6 months because I believe that the Bitcoin spot ETF is going to come. I think the Ethereum spot ETF is going to come. I think DeFi chain with meta chain layer is going to be very bullish. So that is why I'm super bullish. By the way, on Big, we have dollar cost average live. I hope you're using that to dollar cost average in those coins, to use to buy the dip. I think it makes so much sense. We have the most attractive fees in industry on that. Take a look. So that is obviously something I'm very bullish over the next 6 months. But here comes the kind of crux to the story. People forget that what really drove the price over the last, let's say, 2 to 3 years, right, is basically three things: money printing, money printing, money printing, money printing, causing massive speculation. If we're not going to see money printing over the next 12 to 18 months, it's going to be very dire. And I think it's going to be a massive risk because we're going to see an implosion and people are going to get back to reality. Not everyone, but most people. And that's going to be very painful. I really believe this. Now, I think there's a high chance for money printing. That's what makes me so bullish. But I want you to prepare, right, for that understanding. Then the other thing, obviously, Binance sold their entire treasury from dollars into Bitcoin over the last 9 months, 10 months, right? Because of regulation, because they had to. Now, it's a bit of a debate. How much of that was customer funds that they had to kind of pay back to customers? How much is funds that they actually own? I don't know, but they definitely and provably bought a lot of Bitcoin, supporting the price the entire year. And then the other part is Saylor, who has now invested about $5 billion into crypto. That's net inflows. I know people always then say, oh, this is nothing. Look at the trading volume. They trade 10, 20 billion a day. Yeah, but it's all wash trading. It's just left pocket, right pocket. There's very, very little actual depth. And you see the actual depth, right? The actual depth is like 10, 15 million. The billions, this is just like wash trading left and right. And so these 5 billion really a big driver. And so now obviously the question going forward, are we going to see after the ETF that I think is very likely going to come, are we going to see a recession? The US has signaled that they don't want to print extra money. Are we going to see those higher interest rates even higher and maybe even for longer? Are we going to see the US dollar index doing so well as it has been doing over the past couple of weeks? And whenever it does so well, both stocks, crypto, anything risk on. And I actually think Bitcoin should rather be looked at in the eyes of the NASDAQ more than anything else. If that is that going to keep doing well? And that's going to depend a lot on how much money printing is going to happen, how much risk tolerance are people going to bring to the table. And if that's not going to happen, I think that's by far the biggest risk. Imagine once those 4-year cycles going to go negative, meaning that if you bought Bitcoin 4 years ago, you would actually be at a loss. I think it's for the first time we've had this now where Bitcoin went under the old all-time high. And so for the first time, this kind of rule of thumb of the 200-week kind of mark never getting broken, and it did get broken. So, you know, it's that's kind of a bit of the danger in all of that. And so if we wanted to avoid that, right? And so now let's get kind of to the big risk. The big risk is that we're relying on the SEC to approve the ETFs, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and we're relying on the Fed to print money. These are basically the two big bets. And I personally hate that, right? Because that means I'm giving away all the power. I don't think that's good. I think, and it's something that's very difficult to predict, actually, right? I mean, it's very difficult to make a prediction on the Bitcoin ETF. It's very difficult to predict what the Fed's gonna do. The Fed's gonna say they're not gonna print money, but the Fed has been super unreliable. But maybe this time is different, right? So very, very tricky. And so the big risk is that we don't focus on the single most important thing, which is utility. And if price is the only utility and everything, store value, it's a focus on price, right? Currency, price, speculation, price. Everything is price. If there's no focus, if the focus were to go away from price, an actual utility, and that's why I'm so pushing for utility on Bitcoin with ordinals, with drive chains, with side chains. That's why I'm pushing so much DeFi chain, connecting Bitcoin to Ethereum. Why I'm so heavily invested in Ethereum, because I think the utility there is so much stronger, right? I, if we don't focus on that, I think that's going to be a massive, massive risk for the entire industry. And there's going to be such a focus on price and only price and only price. And we're going to forget what truly, really matters. And that is to build, to be useful, to build something that's useful, and with that to drive value. And then price will follow. Now, That doesn't mean that I'm bearish right now. I'm actually super bullish, especially because of the Bitcoin ETF. Also because I believe money printing is going to happen at some point next year, maybe a bit later than most people expect, but it will happen. And that's going to drive the price. But I think we have a higher risk than before that we're not going to see this because of this delicate situation that the Fed is in and the US is in and everything is in. So these are just my thoughts on this. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree. Let me know how bullish, optimistic you are. Again, I am optimistic, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk openly about the risks. So yeah, if you get value out of this, let me know. Then subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment, maybe with your thoughts or a nice feedback, and then I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Yours truly, Julian. Bye-bye.